Coming up in this episode.
By raping these Muslims, they had this idea in mind that we are purifying the bloodline. We are instilling our Serb blood into these fake Turks, these Bosniaks that are remains from the occupation of the Ottomans. 1,000 years after Rasulullah ﷺ, these people died for the kalima. These people died for Islam and their identity as Muslims.
I have a 10-year-old daughter, and when she sees the stuff that's happening in Gaza, due to the nature of the kids, one question they ask is, why is no one helping them, right? And this is a question I had as a child in the 90s when I was watching the Bosnian genocide.
Where they didn't just have them in mass graves, they would dig them up every few days and they would put them in secondary graves.
What is things that maybe you believe that you don't, that you no longer believe? You get it? It would be good just to hear the Serbian side of the story, or what it was like as a Serb growing up during that time.
And I mean, growing up, actually, I used to go Serbia during, every summer. Like, it was in my personal interest to be as pro-Serbian as possible, to make it like, to soften the blow, like to make it not seem as bad.
In this episode, I spoke to Petrit and I continued the conversation with Ayub and Harris. I then speak to a Serb to try get a perspective from the other side. So stay tuned to the end. Episode 2, let's go.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So today I find myself in South London and it's quite late at night, but alhamdulillah, this interview had to be done. Today I'm with brother Petrit, who is a political analyst or political commentator. He has a special focus when it comes to the Balkans. I actually attended a presentation of his not too long ago, which intrigued me and made me think that this is someone that I definitely need to speak to for this project. Just to start with, inshallah, I just want to ask you about your own background, a bit about the Balkans and where you hail from, which is Kosovo, and maybe your personal story on how you ended up in the UK.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Petrit. I've come to the UK since I was 14 years old. I came here during the Kosovan War of the 98 to 99. I initially took interest in the region mainly due to the fact that it is a center of the Muslims in Europe. It has its long history of struggle between the East and the West, and the Muslims of the Balkans are in the middle of that struggle, politically, socially, and I've been following it, and since I still follow it day to day. And I am an IT professional working in London.
Tell me about maybe Kosovo and what happened, and do you have any stories from your parents and what happened close to the time of the Bosnian War?
So initially, if you look at the Balkan, what they call the breakup of Yugoslavia, is that it started in the Bosnia, Croatia, Slovenia time, which is 92 to 95. And in total, you had around 100,000 people killed there. And around 80%, 80,000 were Muslims. Where Kosovo comes into it is that the war actually spread into Kosovo in 98, 99. I was living there with my family. And all the struggles, I do have uncles who were stabbed, who were shot. There's personal stories of my family running through the mountains to reach Albania, to run into the safety. And just to make it more contemporary, I think one way that the Bosnian War has affected me is that I have a 10-year-old daughter, and when she sees the stuff that's happening in Gaza, due to the nature of the kids, one question they ask is, why is no one helping them, right? And this is a question I had as a child in the 90s when I was watching the Bosnian genocide between 92 and 95. I still clearly remember the images of Srebrenica where men were just lined up, quite frankly, just shot, point blank rage, all 8,000 of them. And I think, that comes once in a while at a certain war, certain event that will have an impact on children, and they will be asking these fundamental questions. And I never understood how, and I used to look some of these Bosnians, they were blonde blue eyes, and I thought, how can they let these people die in the middle of Europe, right? I wasn't really sure where Bosnia was physically, but at least I knew it was close to Kosovo. So that's, there are sort of similarities between what's happening now in Gaza and what's happening in Europe. What happened in Bosnia in 1995, which is that it is a conflict genocide which can be stopped. It can be stopped by the powers that be, whether they're Europe and so on. But they make deliberate decisions to prolong that war, right? And this has had an effect on me since then. And now I'm assuming this is going to have the effect on my children, same for Gaza as well. And Europe was happy to let the war in Bosnia go on. And they, in fact, I would say that they proactively helped this. So just to give you an example, when the Yugoslavia was as a whole, the army, the weapons, everything was based in Serbia, around Belgrade. So the Serbs had control of it. So what Europe and US decided to do was to put an arms embargo on the whole of Yugoslavia. But what happened was that the arms embargo only affected the Muslims. It did not affect the Serbs because they had the weapons already, right? And this is, you have even the Western politicians, a statement say that this was okay, right? You have a statement by the former French Prime Minister François Mitterrand, who said that, we are not happy seeing any seeds of Islamic unity in the Balkans whatsoever. And we are happy for the Muslims to basically once in a while die or be killed, right? Just the way that the Zionists have this idea of mourning the lone in Palestine once in a while. I think Europe, they don't say it, right? But they have this idea that it's actually okay if the Muslims in Europe, Muslims in the Balkans decline, and they are not able to set up any unity amongst themselves, which is based on Islamic ideas. Look, the fact that Europe is supporting Germany, supporting Gaza with armaments, this is not new. Okay, this is not new. There's a historical precedent to Europe letting basically Muslims die and be happy with helping the opponent to kill those Muslims. And it's something that is not going to change because that's the nature, really.
The Serbs were seeking revenge for the Ottoman Empire war, or for the crimes, quote, quote, of the, quote, unquote, of the Ottomans. And they said officially that they want to fight the Turks, meaning the Bosnians. This shows us their hate against Islam, and they killed many Muslims.
I want to just pause it there for a moment and give another shout out to my good friend Ilyas Mayo, who provided me with vocal-only backing tracks throughout the whole of this production. Make sure you check out his library at vocaltunes.com. That's tunes with a Z.
And Serbs didn't just live in Serbia, they lived in Bosnia. Bosnia is actually 30% Serb. Croatia has a large proportion of Serbs living in Croatia. So this man, Slobodan Milosevic, wants to re-establish this Serb kingdom that preceded the Ottomans. And he wants to carve for himself this greater Serbian state out of the dying Yugoslavia. He wages a war against Croatia because they want to leave Yugoslavia. He doesn't want them to leave. Why do you think he doesn't want them to leave?
So they can take the representation of the three major states.
Exactly, so they can take the Serbs living in those regions and bring them under this massive, great Serbian state. So he wages a war against Croatia in 1991, Slovenia also, and even Kosovo in 1989, a couple of years before, he brings it under Serb control, de facto control. And so these nations, fortunately for them, they were actually able to repel the Serb invasions. And so Slobodan Milosevic had failed all of his attempts of creating this greater Serbian state. And so his final, last task before he throws in the towel is, of course, Bosnia. And in 1992, there is a referendum. The people of Bosnia want to leave because, they've seen what's happening across Yugoslavia. The Serbs have invaded.
And this referendum is hosted by...
So it's hosted by the president, and the first president of Bosnia was actually a Muslim. His name was Alija Izetbegovic. So he was really Muslim-inspired. You can even see him, there's plenty of videos of him chanting the takbir and, things like that. So he was very Islamic-oriented. And so he declares that even though he's a Muslim, it's important for the people of Bosnia, even though Bosnia is mixed of Croats, Serbs, and Muslims, it is important that we leave Yugoslavia, because if we're in Yugoslavia, as Muslims especially, we're going to become second-class citizens, and we don't want that. We want to be our own people protected. We don't want to have another war waged against us. So there's a referendum to leave Bosnia, and in 1992, Bosnia leaves Yugoslavia, officially, according to the referendum. However, unfortunately, the Serbs didn't recognize this referendum because obviously it goes against their ideas of creating a greater Serbian state. So Serbia during this time is, the bigger Serbia, is funneling in thousands upon thousands of ammunitions, tanks.
And what year is this referendum?
This referendums in 1992 was the final thing which really, sealed the fate for the Bosniak Muslims. And so you have, these mini Serbs, I like to call them. They're called Bosnian Serbs, but for the sake of understanding it, they're Serbs living in Bosnia. They begin to arm themselves with weapons from Greater Serbia, the actual nation of Serbia. So Slobodan Milosevic, although he doesn't actually directly intervenes, he actually funnels in as much support as the Serbs need in Bosnia.
So something's loading, basically.
Yeah. And they're preparing for yet another genocide. And the thing to understand is, it is at this very pivotal moment in which the Serbs in Bosnia are well equipped for another genocide, for a genocide against the Bosniaks, that the Bosniak Muslims weren't prepared. They didn't have an army. They didn't have an army. They didn't have a tank. They had nothing. And it was at this very pivotal moment that the West decided to put an arms embargo on Bosnia, to stop them from getting arms, to stop them from defending themselves. And there was nobody that benefited more from that arms embargo than the Serbs.
That sounds quite sinister. Looking back at it, what was the justification for putting an arms embargo on Bosnia?
Well, you can speculate for yourself. These are Muslims. Do you really want these quote-unquote radical Muslimics to roam around with guns, having and establishing an Islamic emirate in Europe? Can you imagine? You can argue maybe they didn't want spillover, they didn't want to, have the conflict spill over into a regional European war. But obviously it's clear these were Muslims and they wanted to subdue the Muslims. They didn't want them to have the aspirations that Ali Izetbegovic had. And he wanted to create this Islamic identity for the Bosniak Muslims.
So now, from the arms embargo, how does that lead us into what took place? And then Muslims from even the UK, here where we are today, going over to do what they had to do, whether that was support them financially, through charity, or to even fight.
So at this moment in time, the Serbs are rallying their civilians in what is now today known as the Republic of Srpska. This is an entity in Bosnia. We'll get on to how that was formed afterwards. And this entity is, like I said, these are mini Serbs living in Bosnia, and they are having a massive propaganda war against the Muslims, calling them, like I said, Turks. They need to be rid from Europe. There was a quote from the leader of the Bosnian Serbs. His name is Radovan Karadzic, a terrible war criminal, a monster. This man is despicable. He says that if we need to, we will erase them all. 200,000, 300,000, however many. We will make the capital of Sarajevo a black cauldron. And if we can establish a Serb kingdom, if we can establish Serb rule there, then we've achieved our aims. These people, he says, are the trash of this world. They need to be removed. That's his exact words. So you have this really, really rampant anti-Islamophobic dogma, which is continued today if you go to Serbia. So they're beginning to mobilize their people, which, by the way, like we mentioned, during communism, everybody was one another, brothers with one another. They had the idea of brotherhood and unity. So now, all of a sudden, these people who your neighbors, people who you are married to, begin to turn upon each other because you're a Serb and I'm a Muslim. And this was the tactic in which the Serbs used in order to mobilize their entire population. So all the civilians, not all, but a large proportion of the civilians just simply enrolled upon the army. We're going to do a crusade against the Muslims. And they wanted to erase Islam from Europe. And thus, in 1992, you have a few things which trigger the war. It's going to happen anyway. It was boiling down. It was a ticking time bomb. It was only a matter of time until Bosnia transcended into the medieval Barbary as we saw it in the 1990s. So you have pockets of the war in different cities. So you have the siege of Sarajevo, you have the siege of Mostar, you have the siege of Zenica, Gorazde. All these cities, these Bosniak cities, were the prime targets for the Serbs. They wanted to erase the Islamic history, and as their armies and their tanks steamrolled through Bosnia, by the way, they've got no arms, nothing, they would literally destroy any remnant of Islam, eviscerate any remain that there were Muslims there. In towns that were once Muslim for hundreds upon hundreds of years, within moments, literally moments, completely disintegrated. You have hundreds of years old of mosques destroyed, and it was a systematic thing. It wasn't, just some rogue dudes in the army and the paramilitary units that simply did this. It was a systematic policy passed down and orchestrated by the commanders of the Serb army. One of them is Ratko Mladic. He's the most infamous barbarian of them all. He was the architect of the Srebrenica massacre, if you know what happened. Yeah.
And there was also, I think, the most unfortunately famous event was the massacre of Srebrenica, where you had soldiers from the United Nations, which should keep peace on this area, and who collected the weapons of the Bosnian. But at the end, the Serbs killed in approximately 3 days minimum 8,000 Bosnians, bro. 8,000. And no one did react. Interesting fact, bro, for this war is that at the end, when the Bosnians handled to organize themselves, to get some weapon and so on, they achieved to fight against the Serbs, and they arrived before the doors of Banja Luka, which is the capital city of the Republika Srpska. So they could kick out the Serbs of Bosnia, but the American decided to make an agreement of Dayton to stop the war. So the Bosnians were betrayed twice. First, before the war started, and at the end, when the war ended. And I think this should be our lesson, to never ever trust the kuffar.
The most famous massacre, I guess, that we know of and we hear of is the Srebrenica massacre. And maybe someone who hasn't looked too deep into what happened at Bosnia or what happened in Bosnia would think that it was just that genocide. 8,000 or so Muslims were killed. But tell us about the other things that were happening, the other cities that were under siege. Like, tell us about it.
So there's a really interesting map, hope I can maybe show you later, of the genocide across. So it shows you the statistics of each city. For example, Prijedor, you had concentration camps. And by the way, as we're mentioning, it's not just the Serbs that are committing these massacres. Who else are going to be committing these massacres?
The Croatians.
Correct. So Bosnia, literally, like it had done in World War II, had found itself engulfed by both sides, by both of their neighbors. They both planned, even though the Serbs and the Croats hate each other, they both planned to carve up Bosnia, to take as much land as possible. So in the west, you have the Croats committing many massacres. For the most part, they actually were cooperating with the Muslims. But as soon as they started to see, hang on, these guys, they're finished, we might as well just carve up as much land as we want. That is when you see mass concentration camps across the west of Bosnia. That is the border towards Croatia.
By the way, just for you guys, I've cut down hours of these interviews. I've tried to condense it as much as I can. And coming up shortly in this episode is my interview with a Serb. But for now, let's continue.
When you say concentration camps, are we talking like Uyghur concentration camps, or are we talking Hitler Nazi concentration camps?
It's actually somewhere in between. So you had some in most of these concentration camps, many of the people were tortured, abused beyond their ability to live longer. So actually you also had rape camps in Foča, in the east of Bosnia. This was orchestrated by Serbs. Women were abused, raped daily, on a daily. They actually got so tired of raping them, they'd have to have shifts 24/7, rape. That's all they did. And these women, rape isn't just something that you experience and then afterwards it goes. You get diseases. You can die from the diseases that these thugs, these criminals had. So you have women now jumping and killing themselves because they simply cannot live with the trauma of being raped. So although we like to talk about the suffering of the Muslim boys and men, the women also faced the worst of this genocide. And you have to remember, by raping these Muslims, they had this idea in mind that we are purifying the bloodline. We are instilling our Serb blood into these fake Turks, these Bosniaks that are remains from the occupation of the Ottomans. And this is how we're going to change and completely eradicate a race. And this is why I really encourage everybody to go to Bosnia, because you have all of these ideas, all of this. The attempt was real. It was so close to being what is Spain today. No Muslims. Bosnia was that close. And to go there today and to see the minara and to hear the adhan, to hear and see the women in hijab and practicing, that is something which is so important, especially with Palestine. If we see what's happening in Palestine is if we have this defeatist mind point that it's never going to be liberated, look at Bosnia. Bosnia was on the cusps of death, of extinction. So as we mentioned, we have one of the main bloodbaths was in Sarajevo. The longest siege. Sarajevo is the capital city of Bosnia. We have the longest siege in modern history in Sarajevo. For 4 brutally painful long years, Sarajevo was under siege. Exactly, almost it was a playbook of what the Israelis are doing today in Gaza. No water in the city. The Serbs surrounded the entirety of the city. They installed artillery.
And how comes they couldn't siege it? How comes they couldn't take?
Because they didn't give up. The Bosniaks never gave up. They knew that we are Muslims, and there's a famous song, nasheed, wartime nasheed, and it says, "Ima Bosnia, ima Muslimane." There will be a Bosnia, there will be Muslims. We, for as long, Allahu, I can't remember the Bosnian, but it says, for as long as we have Allah, there will be Bosnia, there will be Muslims. The nasheed is really beautiful. It starts off saying, these Serbs say that there's no Muslims in Europe. They say that we are Turks, we are blah, 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 but there will be Muslims. There will be Bosnia. And today, when you go there, you see that. And that nasheed really comes to life when you see the spirit of the Bosniaks still today. So we mentioned the siege of Sarajevo, and it was bombed for 4 years, no water, nothing.
So these are very, 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 very special people.
Absolutely. To imagine that on the Day of Judgment, they'll be raised amongst the Shuhada of Badr, the Shuhada of Uhud, these same people. Imagine where they are in Europe, bro. Thousands upon thousands of miles away from Mecca, where this deen originated from. Hundreds of years, 1,000 years after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, these people died for the kalima. These people died for Islam and their identity as Muslims. And imagine, I could never say, people would say, oh, they don't have beards, they don't have this. When it came to the matter, they gave their lives. Regardless if they had a beard, if they were practicing, they gave their lives. They realized, we're going to die for this deen. We might as well die in honor, without iman. And so whilst I was there, I managed to interview many of the commanders of these Muslim brigades, and they would tell me that it was compulsory to pray your salah. It was compulsory that every soldier learned deen, learned fiqh. They really revived and rediscovered their iman, because after 45 years of communism, they're starting to, because there's no more restrictions during the war, so it's all guns blazing. They are absolutely devouring as much knowledge on Islam as possible. And I spoke to a victim of Srebrenica, one of the final last surviving people of the firing squads. He actually was shot a couple of times, and he lived in Srebrenica. He was just a normal kid. He was 16, 17. And he would say in Srebrenica, as they are being bombarded and besieged, you see the mosque on Jummah completely full. There would be not a single day on Jummah where he'd be able to pray in the mosque, because these Muslims are so, they're eager to learn about Islam, because they're starting to learn about their deen. They're ready to die. They're ready to see the gun, the barrel, and think, subhanAllah, this is Jannah waiting for me.
My father told me that there were 2 things that woke up his generation when it came to their identity and them realizing that they were Muslims. One was the Salman Rushdie affair, and the second was the fact that they heard that there's white Muslims, that Muslims exist in Europe and they're being attacked. And that woke them up, that we have to go there and have to defend them. What do you think the importance of that legacy is for the youth today?
Yeah, absolutely. It really is touching. It really hits home when you mention how many people from here actually went over and then really discovered, not just the Bosnians discovered, but also the whole of Europe discovered the importance of being a Muslim. So let's answer the second question. Firstly, the main takeaway from the whole Bosnia saga is that you cannot assimilate. We, as the diaspora, as Muslims living in a non-Muslim land, we cannot assimilate. If there was ever a people to assimilate with the non-Muslims, with the people of quote-unquote Europe, then it would be the Bosnians. They spoke the same language, they had the same food, they shared the same culture, same everything. They looked the same. If you go there today, you'd never know the difference between a Muslim and a Croat. Of course, if they have a beard or whatever, but you could tell no difference. But when they were slit and when they were sliced open, what the Serbs and those terrorists found were the blood of Muslims. And that is something you can never change. You can try to assimilate. You can try to speak the language of the people in England. You can try to do the jobs that they do. You can go into gambling. You can go into this drug, game that people do, and be on the streets, and you will never be able to be them, no matter how hard you try. When push comes to shove, you're a Muslim and they're a kafir, they're a non-Muslim. So that is really the main takeaway, that these Bosnian Muslims were treated in this terrible way. This is a civilized place, as I mentioned. Bosnia, everybody went there for tourism. And so a place like that to transcend into medieval barbarity, by the way. We're talking like skinning people alive, hanging people, terrible things that you'd expect to hear in the 1600s. For that to happen in Europe, on European soil, it is not far from home. So although we're comfortable in our lands, in Germany, and across Western Europe, wherever we may be, you cannot always be comfortable. You always have to understand and take 2 steps, plan things 2 steps ahead of everything. We have recently with the whole Palestine thing, we're literally being imprisoned for holding tunes, and we're literally being silenced. We're having our voices snatched away from us. We're degraded. We're not seen as people that are worthy of even having a voice. We're not far from, I'm not going to say this is going to happen, we're going to get genocided in London, for example, but we should never be really, really comfortable in our homes, because within a blink of an eye, as the Bosnians, they never imagined that they would have their neighbours shoot them and kill them. I know somebody that personally messaged me, and they said that their dad was shot and killed, and he who was there, left, as the sun was dazzling, his body was rotting, he was still alive. People would walk past him. Muslims, Christians, everybody would walk past him. They simply had nothing to do, and they were the neighbours that killed him. So they could never imagine that this was going to happen. Imagine how we must feel living in our homes. We should never, obviously I'm not going to scare you, but really, really question who you are, your identity, as these same European Muslims. They could easily just assimilate. They could easily hang on, well, I'm not a Muslim, but they didn't. They decided to stand put. They decided to fight till the last breath. And that is a lesson for all of us, that no matter how and what we are, what we do, what our profession, where we live, we are Muslim at the end of the day, and that is our identity, and that is what we will always resort back to. That is our default position.
So the first lesson is a lesson which is back in the history when the Ottomans opened the Balkan. The Ottomans just opened the Balkan by military, and they didn't spread the Islam well. So now and back in history, you had always a lack of knowledge amongst the Balkans. The second point is that the Balkans, or that the Ummah needs to know that countries in the West doesn't want your best, definitely. And the third point is that there are some Muslims or some brothers and sisters saying about the Balkans that they are not so practicing Islam, but they don't know that the Balkans has not a problem in fiqh. They have a problem in, or they have the test in Aqidah. It's not a question, do you pray? It's a question, are you still a Muslim? And the reason for that is we don't have a state, an Islamic state. If we would have an Islamic state, the Islamic State could save Bosnia and Kosovo, give them knowledge about Islam, and protect them for fitna and for the plans of the Westboro.
Okay, so Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Today is a new day. As you can tell, I'm traveling. I'm currently on my way to conduct another interview. I'm not feeling well. As you can hear, trying to clear my throat. I'm currently driving in London. I'm on the way to the south of London, not too far south. I will hopefully join the E13 and then cross over Tower Bridge to get to my destination. Today's going to be a very interesting interview. Obviously, because you know me, I'm like the best journalist out there, and I don't have a bias. I'm not impartial. I am impartial. And I don't want to just cover the story from the Bosnian side. So right now I'm on my way to interview a Serbian. I'm on the way to interview a Serb, rather, should I say. And yeah, I want to know what was his perspective. He wasn't that old during the Bosnian War, but I'm sure he grew up as a kid around that time. It'd be interesting to get his perspective. What his family saying? what was the kind of culture that he grew up in relation to Bosnia. It's good to hear another perspective, and yeah, let's see how it goes, inshallah. So next time you hear me, we will begin the interview. Tea, man.
Yeah.
But this is clearly not Serbian, is it?
No, this is jasmine green tea. Like this is just tea in it.
That's
I will
nice.
put this. Where should I put this?
Anyway. Okay, so Assalamu alaikum. Today I'm here with the person that I just mentioned that I'm going to be speaking with. It's a friend of mine, the only friend of mine who's from Serbia. I don't think as a Muslim, it's quite common to see or to befriend Serbs, or to even generally see them around London. I don't think they're a big population.
There's a community about.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought, like, what are the things that Serbs will say about Muslims?
What Serbs say about Muslims or Islam in general, like barbaric, like the usual Oriental stuff. But I think when it comes to Serbs, it's more acute. So usually, when it comes to Muslims, it is usually specifically Turks. That's where most of the gripe is. They used to take our kids and force convert them, and then they'll send them back to the village that they kidnapped from and burn it down.
Force them to Islam.
Yeah. So they kidnap them when they're young, indoctrinate them, and then send them back to the village that they came from, and they'll burn the village down.
So
that kind of stuff.
So this is the opposite accusation of what? No, it's the same accusation that people say about us today.
Of sorts. How do you mean?
Like we like, there's loads of young people becoming Muslim, and parents will be like, my son became a Muslim or my daughter became a Muslim in the Western world.
Yeah.
Because they befriended a Muslim and they took him and they indoctrinated him.
And then they're gonna get like some terrorist attack back home or something.
So what did that actually happen?
So there is that narrative that during when the Ottomans were in control and ruled over Serbia, what is now Serbia, and a big chunk of the Balkans, that basically so they will take a certain quota of Christian like boys, and
like the Janissaries.
this is exactly what we're talking about.
Okay.
Or Janisar as they call it in Serbian. And yeah, so there's a whole gripe about the Janissaries that you take them, they force conversion. This is the narrative, by the way, yeah. And they take away and take our boys away, borderline kidnap them.
Okay, I now understand. Tell me about yourself, about your culture, what it was like growing up, especially considering you were a young boy while the genocide was happening. So I assume you grew up in the UK at that time. What was the response like? It's like being on the other side, isn't it? We want to hear that side of the story. It's like, for example, the Palestine and Israel conflict. Like, it would be interesting to hear, like, what goes on in an Israeli household. Like, what is the story, or what is the propaganda, or what is things that maybe you believe that you don't, that you no longer believe. You get it? It would be good just to hear the Serbian side of the story, or what it was like as a Serb growing up during that time.
It's weird because obviously as I was growing up, I wasn't actually aware of what was going on at the time. Like my mum, she didn't, she kept that from me. Yeah, my mom kept that from me, so I didn't actually know that there was a war going on at the time. And I mean, this growing up actually, I used to go Serbia during every summer, in fact, or at least most summers. I think for 1 or 2 years, when things got quite heated, I now know that we went to for some holiday. We went, instead of going to Serbia to visit family as we usually did, went to Hungary or somewhere else. Again, I didn't know this at the time. I remember coming back to Serbia one time. I remember seeing a bridge. I had a flat in a town north of Serbia, and we lived near the river Danube. Yeah, this is the famous river that goes through Europe. From Germany to Serbia and so on. And there was a bridge that would cross that river. It's a big bridge. It was a really big bridge, and I remember seeing it collapsed from both ends into the river itself. And it was this big bridge, and just seeing it like that, it was weird. It was like, there's post-apocalyptic scenes that you see, like just like it's just a wasteland, like that, a wasteland kind of scene. But obviously it's just for that bridge specifically, yeah. And I was like, how did that happen? And then later on I learned it was NATO that bombed Serbia, basically. I guess like bridges and whatnot, these are strategic infrastructure. But at the same time, I'm saying, okay, NATO. This is when kind of I started to slightly be more aware of what's going on. Okay, wait, NATO bombed my country. The West bombed us. Okay, this is interesting. One of the factors that kind of got me interested into Islam was that, okay, the West was against us. So I felt some antagonism towards the West while I was living in the West myself.
As a European.
Yeah, as an Eastern European. And then, growing up, kind of after most of the war, or completely after the war had concluded, I kind of got to know more of what actually happened during that time as I was growing up, right? So as I was growing up at the time, I didn't really realize what was happening. It was more after. I think the narrative, it's obviously a Serbian narrative, is fundamentally a nationalistic narrative. And what does nationalism do best? It downplays it downplays the atrocities of your side and amplifies atrocities done against your side, right? I knew there was a war. A big thing Serbs would say a lot was that there were no good sides. So yeah, there were no good sides. Everyone was a bad guy. No one was innocent. That kind of thing. Yeah, there were no good sides. So
they don't claim that they were in the right.
I think it was a case that no one was completely innocent. Oh, obviously you're going to get a spectrum, right? You're going to get people say no, we were completely in our right to defend ourselves or whatever, things like that. But a common thing that I've heard was, no, you know what? No one was innocent. No one was completely good. In a way to kind of, I guess, whitewash anything that the Serbian side has done, right? So that was one big thing, and that's something that I think that's something I believed in at the time. It's weird, right? Because obviously you go Serbia every year for holidays. You meet your family, and everyone's nice, and you meet people that like on the ground, and the experiences you have with them are lovely. Yeah.
I went to Serbia as well myself.
Oh, did you, mashallah? What was your experience in Serbia?
I don't know. I was very wary.
Yeah, of course.
And my dad told me be careful when you're there.
Yeah. To be fair, I don't think it matters for you that much because you're brown.
And then I saw something. I saw like a very strange scene. So in the hotel that I was staying at, there was like a bar, pub, restaurant thing downstairs.
Yeah.
And as I walked past it, I saw a family there, like all like white people.
Okay.
I assumed they were Serb.
Okay.
And they all had alcohol at the table when they were eating food.
Yeah.
But then there was a woman in hijab and abaya sitting with them. Like she's part of the family, but like, I don't know. I didn't know what to make of it. I was so confused at the time.
Yeah. Islam in the Balkans is a bit mad sometimes. like I mean, listen, I'm all those decades of communism, yeah, they did a number on Muslims. They really battered down Islam in the region. So this is the thing, like even after I converted, my mum was like, you should be like the Muslims that she was used to maybe are ones that were not as practicing. The women, a lot of women did not wear the hijab. A lot of Muslims drank. A lot of Muslims,
Are we talking about Serbian Muslims or Bosnians and Serbs?
I guess mainly it's Bosnian Muslims.
Yeah.
I think alhamdulillah, there has been a change since the war that there are more practicing brothers, but it's still a big thing, and it was a bigger thing.
If I'm looking at it from a historical perspective, the Ottoman Empire took over those areas. I'm not here to justify what they've done, the good and the bad and whatnot. Obviously, clearly, this is in the decline period. The Ottomans, they were just waging jihad in Europe, basically. And some people they looked after, some people they didn't take it too well. And strangely enough, that area, specifically Bosnia, they decided to stick with their religion. Whereas maybe you could argue that Albania had a harsh communist rule, and other places it wasn't as strong. Even parts of Serbia was under the Ottomans. I remember going there, Belgrade.
Yes.
you had like the Ottoman line, and I know that we spoke about there was like everyone's innocent, that kind of view. Was there a view of that you ever came across that we were in the right and we rightfully did what we had to do? Was there any justification for genocide that took place? Like, what do people say about the massacres that happened?
Yeah, one thing I heard was because I think it got categorized. Like for example, what happened at Srebrenica? That was an act of genocide, right? And you have, Serbian apologists will say no, it wasn't. It was a massacre. Okay, yes, but it wasn't a genocidal act. I.e., you're trying to make it like an exception rather than the rule, basically. Yeah. So it's really damage control, essentially.
What was your views before you became Muslim? Did they change in terms of your view on Bosnian people, or you didn't really care?
So the thing is, I don't think I ever hate, like, I wasn't against Bosnian people. I was never against Bosnian people. I was just trying to reconcile with what I've been hearing and trying to make sense of the situation, because actually for me this was like it was a very frustrating issue for me. I was trying to I was looking at the war in Yugoslavia, Serbia, Bosnia, Croatia, etc. with that kind of in mind. I'm thinking, well, what is going on? And it was very hard to impossible to find evidence that what Serbia did was justified. And I tried hard.
So you actually tried?
It was in my personal interest to be as pro-Serbian as possible, to make it like, to soften the blow, like to make it not seem as bad what we did as possible, to legitimize it or whatever, like anything that I could find, like, come on, there must be something like that we did that was justified, like, but I couldn't really find anything, and that annoyed me. But obviously, after time went on and I became Muslim, I ultimately did change my mind. It's funny because Bosnian Muslims and Serbs, you can't tell the difference between them. They look the same, they got the same ethnicity. I mean, Serbs can't tell the difference from Bosnians themselves.
So they're considered, was it Slavic people?
They're Slavic, yeah, they're Slavic, exactly. Like even Pakistanis can look at Bangladeshi and be like, I can tell. To an extent. Sometimes,
I think you can tell as well.
Alhamdulillah, yeah, I can. Some brothers look Bengali, but they're Pakistani. Sometimes you get those funny ones, but yeah, for large part, there is a difference you can tell. But with Bosnians and Serbians, you cannot. Even them themselves cannot. The only way to make some kind of delineation is just by their name. Ahmed, Mehmet, whatever. Yeah, they will have an Islamic name. And that's the only way you can tell.
Do you think that it's possible that in the future something similar to what happened in the past could boil up and happen again?
You mean in the region or like anywhere in the West?
In that region.
Okay. I think an aspect of that is already happening now. I think so in Republika Srpska, which is the region of Bosnia that is majority Serb. I think they've already kind of started, increasing in nationalistic rhetoric. The guy who's in charge of the region, I can't remember his name, something Dodik, I think. He's ramping stuff up. I'm not too invested in the situation. I'm not too sure what's going on, but I there is a sense that tensions are rising again. Spurred by the Serbs, with Russia backing them, of course, as their Orthodox Christian brothers. Serbs pride themselves a lot that they managed to hold on to their Christianity during the several centuries of Ottoman rule. Like that is a big thing in Serb culture. Like that's one of the pillars of Serbian identity, you could say. The Ottomans shaped Serbian identity. Serbia has a history with Islam, and Eastern Europe has a history with Islam that you don't really find in the west of Europe, like in the UK. Islam doesn't have much say in British identity. Islam has a lot of say in Serbian identity, in Greek identity, and and a lot of Eastern European countries that were on the borders with Islam, that literally clashed with Islam, that were also dominated at one point by Islam, and the Ottomans, and the civilization. That is a way more, like, the attitude to Islam is more harsh.
So
Yeah.
you know, when someone becomes a Muslim, so like obviously my ancestors became Muslim, you became Muslim yourself, your identity and your history almost changes from a very specific regional history to the story of the Prophet ﷺ, all the way down to the Ottomans, the Abbasids, the Umayyads, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. And now we live in a world where the Ummah story is very vast. We're talking about the Muslims in Europe, the Muslims in America, the Muslims of Australia, the Muslims in the Middle East, the Muslims of China. Where do you think that what happened in Bosnia fits in terms of as a lessons for us, or as part of our historical legacy for the youth to kind of, is it important for them to kind of understand this as part of the Ummah's history?
You know what's interesting what you said? It reminds me of a quote by Churchill. He actually talked about the Balkans. He said the Balkans has more history than it can consume. But to be fair, you can apply that quote to the Ummah. Like, the Ummah has more history than it can consume. There's so many stories that we will never hear about, probably, that we'll never get to know. But yeah, like, there's abundant lessons that I think we can learn from Bosnia. We can learn what happens when you do compromise. We can learn the strength that you get from holding on to your Islam. We can learn about, how devastating it is to have no one to rely on except, the non-Muslim powers, like the UN. The UN pose themselves as some kind of, a peacekeeping force, right? And, every Bosnian Muslim knows that is a joke, an absolute joke, that we can't seek protection from other than our own, or our lambs to slaughter, right? There's a lot of things that we can reflect on. Even the existence of Bosnia. Like, Bosnia is the most westward nation that Islam has a foothold in. It's the most west Islam is. If you take away Spain, right? Islamic Spain. But obviously we're talking about current day, so that's Bosnia, and it's amazing. And you see just whiter than white people, but they're indigenously Muslim, and it's beautiful to see. And they've got their own cultural flavor of Islam. Yeah, that is Bosnian, right? And it makes you realize how varied and how multicultural Islam can be, and how varied it can be. So yeah, there's a lot of things to take from the example of Bosnia.
I hope you enjoyed that episode, and I thank you for staying tuned so far. Next up, I want to explore the UK Muslim experience. How did the news of the war reach the UK in the 90s? I also want to take you on a journey of some of those Muslims from the UK who went to the war and participated themselves. Until then, see you in the next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.